Elmer looked out the window. How unjust life is, after all. She had broken up with Peter when they were in their 20s. It had been 7 years. 7 years that they hadn't spoken to each other, fighting over nothing. Although, he could only call it a trivial thing now. Back then, it had been a very meaningful reason to quarrel, and even to fight. Back then, they, twin brothers, had fallen in love with the same girl, and for the first time in their lives, neither of them wanted to give in. Avis was beautiful. Beautiful, but as it turned out later, very careless. She realized that the brothers were twins, and that they had no differences at all, except one thing, which she did not immediately recognize. It amused her at the time. As it turned out, and not only that, Avis was having an affair at once with Elmer and Peter. Elmer had no idea that his beautiful Avis knew her brother. She didn't get to see him as often as he wanted. But what could he say? Elmer just idolized her. He knew his brother had someone too, but because of his love affair, he didn't have time to even talk to him. Peter behaved the same way. He was only thinking about his girlfriend. The boys only had a mother. Their father left her in obscurity when she became pregnant. It was him that Peter had inherited a not-so-good fortune from. Well, not that ugly, but still. Brother had strange big toes, as if turned inside out. Mother had said their father had the same. They didn't look ugly, more like strange. Apparently, it was a trait that Elmer somehow didn't pass on. Peter always wore closed-toe shoes and hated summer flip-flops. That was the only thing that distinguished them, but otherwise they were very similar. Since childhood, the brothers were not only brothers, but also great friends. Always and everywhere they were together, always together. Whether it was a camping trip with friends, or a fight around the corner at school. They went to the same branch of a construction college and were going to be together for the rest of their lives. And then, Elmer wandered aimlessly down the street. Avis said she was busy today, and he just had nothing better to do. He was in a bad mood, which was always the case when he didn't have his girlfriend around. He was about to go home when he saw her. She was walking down the street on the other side. Peter was hugging her gently around the waist. Elmer's eyes misted over, and only one thought. Avis just mixed them up, and Peter took advantage. He rushed across the road with a kind of snarl. Cars squealed with their brakes. Drivers shouted to the guy. Peter turned around too. Strangely, there was no fear in his eyes. It was as if he was worried about him, even rushing toward him, leaving Avis behind. "Elmer, what happened?" Elmer immediately punched him. Peter was on his feet. There is a reason they had been in the same boxing section for over 10 years. "What's the matter with you? You're out of your mind." "You, get away from my girlfriend." "What? She's my girlfriend. We've been dating for 3 months. "It's been 3 months that we've been dating." Elmer rushed forward, but this time, Peter answered him. Avis screamed. People started running up to them. No one tried to break them up, though. They were both Elmer and Peter, over 6 feet tall and weighing 100 kilos. So, it would be dangerous to get at them, and they were fighting to the death. Elmer understood everything, and so did Peter. They should have stopped, but when they both realized that their brother had been hugging Avis, kissing her, and sleeping with her, a new wave of rage rose up. The only thing that stopped them was the arrival of the police. At the police station, they had to put the brothers in different cells because no one wanted to calm down. They were only released when their mother arrived. She was crying and did not understand what was going on, but neither of them wanted to explain anything. Peter packed up the same day, picked up his college papers, and left. Elmer went into the army. He and his brother never saw each other again. He knew that Peter sometimes called his mother. Immediately, he left, because even the memory of him made him furious. By the way, Avis got married 3 months later, though she divorced that same year. When Elmer returned from the army, they ran into each other by chance. Elmer had gone out for a beer in the evening, and someone touched his shoulder. "Hi." He turned around. A slightly tipsy Avis was standing in front of him. Elmer threw the money on the counter and walked silently toward the exit. She caught up with him on the street. "Elmer, didn't you recognize me? I missed you." He paused, then turned slowly toward her. Avis licked her lips invitingly. Then he took her by the throat with one hand, lifted her up and said, "If you ever get in my way again, I'll kill you." He let her go. Avis fell on the pavement, wheezed, and he left without turning around. 7 years had passed since then. Elmer knew Peter lived on the other side of the world, knew that he was as unmarried just like him, but that was all. His mother, when she tried to start a conversation about Peter, knew right away he wouldn't listen. And then, one day, Elmer burst out. "Mom, if he wants to come back, you just say so. I have no problem leaving." "No way, son. What are you talking about?" Mom cried softly. And Elmer felt very ashamed, but he didn't say anything, just left the house. The clouds, floating somewhere nearby, seemed so cozy, soft. Elmer was beginning to feel sleepy. The plane was quite small, but the flight was as smooth as on that big airliner he had flown on just a few hours before. Yesterday, he came home from work. He stopped in a bookstore on his way, and a young salesgirl immediately showed him a new medical encyclopedia. He had a weakness. Since childhood, he wanted to be a doctor, but became a builder. He had a whole shelf of medical books at home. He scolded himself so much, but could not do anything about it. He preferred to sit with a book like this, not with his friends drinking beer. This encyclopedia had only recently come out. He had been waiting for it to arrive because it had everything. Elmer didn't really like to scour the internet because he simply didn't know exactly what to look for, and here it said it all by itself. Of course he bought it, and he came home in excellent spirits. His mother met him at the door, completely white as snow. He rushed to her. Mama, what?" Peter went down the shaft. He's dying. He asked God." Then there were crazy calls. The ambulance. Mother was taken to the hospital with a heart attack. "Elmer, son, you have to go. You have to help him. You have to try to reconcile." Peter immediately bought a plane ticket. 2 hours later, he landed and managed to make a connection. Very fortunate because this flight was strictly every 3 days. Elmer managed to call the doctor in time. Peter was in serious condition, but for now, he didn't want to think about the fact that this for now could end at any moment. "I understand that you're in a hurry, but please hurry some more. I don't know how long we can hold him. It keeps calling for you and Miranda." "Miranda?" "Yes, Miranda. I've already taken my ticket. I should be at your place in 3 hours. He covered his eyes. Behind him, someone groaned loudly. Elmer's sleep was immediately blown away, and he turned around. A young girl was sitting behind him. She was holding onto a huge belly and moaning. "Are you all right?" She looked at him with frightened eyes. "I think I am in labor." The man who was sitting next to her jumped up and shouted, "People, help! Is there a doctor? There's a woman in labor." In a minute, the only stewardess was standing next to them. It took another 40 minutes to get on the plane. There are no villages on the way, no towns. Nothing, just a gorge and doctors. Elmer glanced around the cabin. Elderly people, 2 frightened young boys, a woman on crutches. At that moment, the girl screamed shrilly. He turned to the stewardess. "Hot water, towel, knife, alcohol. Anything you have, get it." Then he turned to the guys. "Pull up 2 seats so we can put her down." They rushed to do it. The plane hit turbulence. Elmer could hardly stand on his feet. The flight attendant returned. She, Elmer, and 2 guys moved the girl. He had never attended a labor, but he read a lot. The girl was screaming. The plane was shaking. The flight attendant was crying. An elderly man was praying loudly. Everyone else just froze in silence. 15 minutes later, in the silence of the plane, a baby screamed and cried. Elmer smiled. "There you go, boy." He began quickly wrapping the baby up and suddenly froze. The man saw the baby's feet, or rather its big toes, unnaturally turned outward. "Are you all right?" "Man, let me wrap it." The stewardess took the baby from him, and he looked at the girl who was smiling and crying. "Are you Miranda?" She answered with parched, nibbled lips. "Yes, how do you know?" "I'm Elmer. I don't know if that tells you anything." Are you Peter's brother?" "Yes." She stared at him for a while, and suddenly screamed. "What's wrong? What happened to him? Why are you flying to him? What happened?" He didn't have time to respond. She fainted. The plane was coming in for a landing. It took him an hour to get to the hospital. While the ambulance was taking Miranda and the baby away, Elmer calmed them down. "Miranda, I don't know anything myself. The hospital called me. I'm on my way. Please let me know right away. I have not been able to reach him for 3 days. He himself sent me closer to civilization to give birth there, and I decided to come back. Knew something was wrong." The doctor met him at the door. He didn't say anything. He just said, "Let's go. He's conscious, waiting for you." They entered a room, and Elmer saw Peter, or rather, a lot of tubes and instruments of some kind. Everything was beeping and flashing. "Brother." Peter opened his eyes, smiled. "Brother." Elmer went over to him, sat down, took his hand, which also had some tubes coming out of it. "Elmer, I wanted you to come. I have to tell you. Forgive me, brother." "No, Peter. I'm the one who should say sorry." "Wait, Elmer. Listen to me. This is very important. I have a girlfriend. We were going to get married. She's pregnant. I have her address in my phone. Her name is Miranda. Elmer, please don't leave her. I love her and our future baby very much. She has no one but me. Help them." "You help them yourself." "Don't talk nonsense, Elmer. I've read your books too, and I know I'm not going to make it. Just promise me you won't leave her." "I won't leave them, I swear. You've got a son. He'll probably be a pilot on the plane." "A son? How?" "Miranda got worried that you weren't answering, so she flew out to you." "I didn't want her to worry. Son, how are they?" "They're fine. I had to deliver the baby. She's good for you, and your son's a real force to be reckoned with." There were tears running down Peter's cheeks. "Son." He turned his head slightly toward Elmer. "Promise me that my son will always know he has you." "I promise." "Forgive me, brother." Peter closed his eyes, all the instruments beeping sharply for some reason. Elmer jumped up. "Help! Help him!" But the doctor, who had been standing next the whole time, just shook his head. "There's nothing we can do." Elmer fell to his knees in front of the bed and wept. 2 weeks later, he opened the door. "Come in, Miranda." A girl in a black scarf with a small child in her arms stepped into the apartment. Elmer and Peter's mother slowly emerged from the room. The woman had grown old. On her head was a black kerchief. "Hello, Miranda. Come in. This is your home now." The two women embraced and cried. Elmer carefully picked up his nephew and carried him into the room. He wanted to cry himself, but he courageously restrained himself. He must do everything to make Miranda and his nephew, whom she decided to name Peter, feel good in this world. 2 years have passed. Elmer and Miranda flew to Peter's grave. "Brother, we're here to see you. You know, it just so happens in this life that you and I love the same women. I love your Miranda. I'm ready for everything for her and Peter. But I want to ask you, to ask for a blessing or something." Miranda crouched quietly in front of the grave, tidying the grass, arranging the flowers. Tears streamed down her cheeks. "I will do anything to make them truly happy, the way they deserve." A warm breeze blew through the branches, and they rustled happily. Elmer looked up in surprise. Strange. There had been no hints of wind a minute ago. Miranda cried, "Thank you, Peter." She stood up, took Elmer's hand, and they walked toward the exit. A new life awaited them.